My phone buzzed at 3:52 p.m. A name I hadn't seen in 9 months flashed on the screen. Martin Hale, my father. The text wasn't a question, it was a summons. Family dinner, 7:30 p.m., Iron Ledger. Don't be late. At that exact second, a news alert slid into view right beneath it. Northline closes Series D. Valuation hits $192 million. The timing wasn't an accident. He didn't miss me. He saw the number. I used to ache for their attention, used to replay conversations in my head, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. But staring at that screen, the old hunger didn't surface. Instead, my thoughts went quiet and cold, like a data center humming behind locked doors. Be honest, have you ever had someone ignore you when you were drowning, then suddenly reach out the moment you started winning? If you know exactly how that feels, you already understand what happened next. I stood in the center of my walk-in closet in downtown Austin, Texas. The room was climate-controlled, soundless, lined with rows of tailored jackets, silk blouses, and shoes arranged with mathematical precision. 10 years ago, a text like that would have sent me spiraling. I would have ripped through my wardrobe trying to engineer the perfect version of myself, successful enough to earn my father's approval, but small enough not to threaten my brother's ego. I would have tried to compress my worth into something digestible, something they might accept. Today, that reflex was gone. In its place was a calm, deliberate focus. I wasn't dressing for a family dinner. I was preparing for an operation. I passed the tailored suits and designer heels and reached for the top shelf, pulling down a cracked plastic bin coated in dust. Inside were the artifacts of the woman they believed I still was. A faded denim jacket with a torn seam at the collar, white sneakers scuffed thin at the soles, a gray sweater that hung loose and tired on my frame. Sliding into them felt like stepping backward into an abandoned version of myself, like putting on a cold, heavy skin. You might think it was a trick, a way to bait them into revealing themselves, but standing in front of the mirror, watching the founder disappear and the invisible daughter resurface, I understood the truth. This was the last test. This is the invisible chain survivors carry, the irrational whisper that says, maybe if I strip away the success, maybe if I come back with nothing, they'll finally love me for who I am. I knew the outcome. The probability was 0. But I needed to run the simulation one final time. I needed to let them reject me when I looked poor, so when I revealed what I'd become, there would be no guilt left in me. Their rejection had to be complete. I tied my hair into a careless bun and checked my reflection. I looked exhausted. I looked defeated. I looked exactly right. I picked up my phone and dialed my COO. She answered on the first ring. "It's Claire," I said. My voice was flat, stripped of warmth. "Execute the purchase." There was a brief pause. She asked if I was certain I wanted to proceed with the acquisition of a regional wholesale food distributor. It wasn't aligned with our software-first portfolio. They're carrying $3.4 million in outstanding vendor debt tied to Red River Supply, I said, staring into my own eyes in the mirror. That debt is the leverage. I want it closed before dessert. Send confirmation to my secure line. Understood, she said. We're moving now. I ended the call and slipped my phone into the pocket of the cheap denim jacket. I wasn't going to Iron Ledger to save my family. I wasn't going to plead for a seat at the table. I was going to inspect a distressed asset before liquidation, wearing the uniform of the daughter they never cared to see. I ordered an Uber E, not a black car, not an SUV, just a tired sedan with a pine-scented air freshener and the faint smell of old fries. I watched the city lights smear across the window as my thoughts drifted backward. Back to the crumbs. That's all they ever gave me, crumbs, enough to keep me tethered, never enough to feel whole. There's a psychological principle called intermittent reinforcement. It's how you keep a subject pressing a lever long after the reward stops coming. Give nothing and they quit. Give everything and they get bored. But give a reward just often enough, unpredictably, and they'll exhaust themselves chasing it. My family perfected this. They weren't cruel all the time. That would have been easy to escape. They were cruel most of the time. The remaining sliver was the trap. I remember being 16, working unpaid evenings at Hale Grocers, stocking shelves while my friends went to movies. My father would walk by, grip my shoulder, and say, "Good job, Claire. You're learning the value of work." One sentence, one pellet. I lived on it for weeks. 3 years ago, when the tax liens surfaced and their accounts froze, I drained $48,000 from my savings, money meant for my first condo, and wired it to them. My mother hugged me. She cried and said, "We're a team." I lived off that hug for half a year, replaying it whenever they forgot to call, whenever I was excluded. "We're a team," I told myself. Then Christmas came. I showed up with gifts. My brother Evan arrived with his new girlfriend. My parents hovered over her, refilling her glass, asking about her plans. I sat on the couch for 3 hours. No one asked me a single question. I was the person who'd kept the business alive, and I was less interesting than a stranger. That was when the lever snapped. I understood I wasn't family. I was infrastructure, like electricity, invisible until it stopped working. The Uber pulled up in front of Iron Ledger, a slab of dark stone and iron meant to intimidate and impress. I stepped out, checked my reflection in the glass. The denim looked cheap against the polished facade. Perfect. I inhaled, not to calm myself, but to sharpen the edge. I wasn't here to beg for a reward. I was here to end the experiment. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. I walked into the private dining room and let the door close behind me. The room smelled like aged leather, truffle butter, and confidence that hadn't been earned in years. Martin Hale sat at the head of the table, napkin tucked into his collar like a relic of a man who still believed he was in charge. My mother, Elaine, swirled a glass of wine I recognized from the menu as costing more than my first month's rent ever had. My brother Evan was already halfway through a dry-aged ribeye, cutting into it like he hadn't paid for a meal in his life. They all looked up at once. Silence stretched. Elaine's eyes swept over the denim jacket and worn sneakers, and her mouth tightened, not with concern, but embarrassment. "Claire," she sighed, setting down her glass, "is that really what you're wearing? We said this was a celebration." "Car trouble," I lied smoothly, pulling out the empty chair at the foot of the table. "I had to take an Uber." Evan snorted, sawing into his steak. "Uber E? Guess the Forbes money didn't stretch to a black car." "Enough," my father snapped. He didn't ask how I was, didn't ask about the car. He pointed at the place setting. "Sit. We're already ordering dessert. We have business to discuss." I sat. My hand stayed folded in my lap, refusing the choreography of napkins and stemware. I calibrated the room. "We saw the article," Martin said, leaning forward, elbows on the linen. $192 million. That's a serious valuation. Good to see you finally applying the work ethic we instilled in you." We instilled. The audacity was almost admirable. "We have an opportunity," he continued, his voice slipping into a rehearsed pitch. "Hale Grocers is evolving. We're launching Hale Prime, hyper-local gourmet delivery, competing with Amazon Fresh, but focused on high-net-worth clients." He slid a glossy folder across the table. It stopped inches from my hand. "We've got the infrastructure," Evan added, through a mouthful of beef. "Brand recognition, we just need fuel for liftoff." "How much?" I asked. My voice was flat. "Seed capital," Martin waved it off. $3.4 million, structured as a convertible note. You get equity, we get liquidity, we upgrade the fleet, build the app, launch before the holidays." $3.4 million. They weren't asking for help. They were asking me to fund a fantasy. I didn't open the folder. I looked at Evan. "Who's building the logistics software?" He rolled his eyes. "We've got a vendor. It's handled." "Which one?" I pressed.
What's their last mile perishable success rate? What's your projected customer acquisition cost in Q1? Evan slammed his fork down. God, you're insufferable. You always were. You got lucky with some app and now you think you're Warren Buffett. You're wearing dirty sneakers in a 5-star restaurant. You should be grateful we're letting you in early. Elaine nodded, sipping her wine. Don't be difficult, dear. This is family business. We're trying to include you. I studied them like a failed earnings call. Expensive food, an open tab, absolute certainty I'd pick it up. No apology for the months of silence, just entitlement dressed as kinship. The last irrational hope in my chest flickered and went dark. What replaced it was cold, precise, immovable. "You're right," I said softly. "Business is about details." I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. "What kind of details?" my father asked, suddenly cautious. "The ones that matter," I said, tapping the screen. "Supply chains, vendor exposure, solvency." I turned the tablet toward him. Hail Prime isn't expansion, it's a cover story. You don't need seed money to launch an app. You need cash to cover the $3.9 million you owe your primary distributor. The room went still. Martin froze mid-sip. Evan stopped chewing. Elaine sensed the pressure change. "That's internal," Martin said quietly. "Where did you get that?" "It's not internal if you know where to look," I said, "or who to ask." I swiped. Invoices filled the screen. "Your credit line was cut 4 months ago. Red River Supply terminated deliveries last week. Your shelves will be empty by Thanksgiving." "Temporary cash flow issue," Evan said, but the bravado was gone. "We're renegotiating." "No," I said, "you're not, because you're not negotiating with them anymore." I looked at my father. "You're negotiating with me." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Northline acquired Red River Supply this afternoon," I said. "Closed at 4 p.m. I now own the debt, the contracts, and the trucks scheduled to deliver your holiday inventory tomorrow morning." Silence pressed in. Elaine blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "I am your supply chain. If those trucks don't move, Hale Grocers is insolvent in 24 hours. Evan laughed, too fast, too sharp. "You're bluffing. That kind of deal takes months." "It takes months if you need financing," I corrected. "It takes hours if you pay cash." I watched realization spread. They were staring at the denim jacket, the scuffed shoes, the messy hair, and for the first time they weren't seeing a disappointment. They were seeing a threat. "Why?" Martin whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because you taught me how business works. Control supply, control outcomes. I'm just following your playbook." "We're family," Elaine said, her voice shaking. "You wouldn't hurt your own family." "I'm not hurting you, I'm securing an asset, the same way you tried to secure my $3.4 million over dinner. It's just business, Mom. Isn't that what you always said when you missed my birthdays?" Martin slammed his hand on the table. "You ungrateful, after everything we gave you." "You met the legal minimum," I said calmly. "Food and shelter aren't a loan. They don't accrue interest." I leaned forward. "Now about those trucks. If you want them rolling, we need to discuss my ownership stake." He stared at me. The vein in his temple pulsed. "You want equity?" "I want control," I said. 51% or the trucks stay parked." Evan jumped up. "You can't do this. This is my company." "Sit down, Evan," I said without looking at him. "The adults are talking." Martin glanced at his son, then back at me. He saw the math. He swallowed. "We can talk partnership," he said through clenched teeth. 20%. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a foreclosure prevention." I swiped the tablet again. "And before you decide, there's something else you need to see." The withdrawal started small at first, 5,000, 10,000, labeled as consulting fees, maintenance overages. Then they escalated, 50,000, 100,000. I scrolled to a highlighted line near the bottom of the page. $418,000 transferred out of the Hale Grocers Employee Pension Fund on August 11th. The silence that followed wasn't just heavy, it was dead. My father looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Evan's face drained of color until he looked carved from chalk. "That money is protected by federal law," I said quietly. "It belongs to the cashiers who stood on concrete floors for decades. It belongs to the butchers and stock clerks who trusted you. And you took it." "It was a loan," Martin croaked. "We were going to replace it once Hale Prime launched." "You used it to cover Evan's debts," I said, cutting through him. I turned the tablet. The numbers were merciless. The transfers didn't go to developers. They went to a shell entity in the Caribbean, tied directly to an online sportsbook. I looked at my brother. "You gambled away the retirement of 200 employees." Elaine made a sound like the air had been punched from her chest. She stared at them both. "You stole from them," she whispered. "Tell me you didn't steal from the pension." "I had to," Martin snapped, not meeting her eyes. "He was in trouble. The people he owed."
You weren't protecting the family, you were protecting a criminal, and you became one. The posturing evaporated, the buzzwords died. What remained were three terrified people sitting in the wreckage of their choices. This isn't bad management, I said. This is federal prison, RICO exposure, the kind of case that erases everything. I tapped the tablet once. The only reason agents aren't knocking right now is because I own the debt and I haven't filed the report. Elaine's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't for the employees. They were for the life she was about to lose. She reached across the table, stopping short when she saw my expression. "You owe us," she sobbed. "We gave you life. We raised you." I stood, slowly, calmly. "You're confusing biological input with emotional equity. Food and shelter are the legal baseline. Emotional equity is earned by showing up, by remembering birthdays, by asking how someone is and waiting for the answer." I walked behind my father's chair. "You invested nothing in me. You treated me like a bad asset. Now that I'm profitable, you want a dividend. That's not how markets work. You sold your shares years ago." Evan shook, staring at the door. "I'm not here to send you to prison," I said business flat. "Not because I owe you, because those employees deserve their pensions, and I won't let your incompetence destroy the company name." I pulled one last document from my bag and slid it forward. "This is a severance agreement. Martin, you retire immediately for health reasons. Evan, you're terminated for cause effective tonight. 51% controlling interest transfers to Northline. In exchange, I recapitalize the pension fund and assume vendor debt." "Fired?" Evan squeaked. "What am I supposed to do?" "Learn a trade. Gambling isn't working." I handed my father a cheap plastic pen. "Two options: sign and walk away with a modest monthly stipend I control, or I leave, the trucks stay parked, and the audit goes to the Department of Justice." He stared at the pen, at his wife, at his son, at me. He signed without reading. "Smart choice," I said, taking the papers. I left the signed contract and the unpaid bill on the table. The steaks had gone cold, the wine sat untouched. I walked out, past laughing diners and clinking glasses. Nobody noticed the girl in the denim jacket. Outside, the air felt lighter. My Uber waited. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Home," I said. "And can we stop for ice cream? I'm celebrating." As we pulled away, I blocked their numbers. Not in anger, in hygiene. I looked out to the city lights and felt the knot finally loosen. I didn't lose a family, I closed a liability, and for the first time my ledger was balanced. Sometimes the most expensive thing you can buy is your freedom, and it's worth every penny. If this story resonated, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends who need to hear it, and comment below with your perspective or the key lesson you took away.